Okay, I will go ahead and call to order. We have everyone, yes, the November meeting of the Bloomington Board of Park Commissioners. And Kim, could you start us with the roll call, please?
Yes, Kathleen Phillips.
Here.
Ellen Rodkey. Here. Jim Whitlatch.
Here.
Israel Herrera.
Here.
Okay, so we do have all four members here. We have Paula McDevitt, the administrator, virtually from the conference in Indianapolis, right?
Yes, our Indiana Park and Recreation Association annual conference. So I'm here, and we also have Leslie Brinson and Becky Higgins attending virtually.
Okay, and we have Tim Street here in the room for questions that board members or the public might have. So first up is the consent calendar. And we've all had a chance to look at that for several days, thanks to Kim. I just had, before we take a motion to vote on that, I just had a question about A11, which is actually from you, Tim, so you could probably answer. This is the air quality situation over at Switchyard Maintenance Building. Yeah, so I just wondered if this was like recently came to attention, or it says it used to be a print shop, so maybe there were some issues there before it became renovated in some way. So just a little more background.
Sure. And I'm on. Tim Street, Operations Director for Bloomington Parks. We have this contract out there. This is just a precautionary. We don't have any reason to believe anything is wrong. We don't generally spend a lot of time in that building doing meetings. Nobody's working in there full time or anything like that, but kind of just a peace of mind thing that we thought, you know what, it'd be great to do some indoor air quality testing, particularly on the upstairs. That's kind of stuffy in that building, and just make sure we don't have any issues, and if we do, to mitigate them.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. So if there aren't any other questions about items in the consent calendar, we'll go ahead and take a motion to approve.
Okay, I can move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, and a roll call vote, please.
Kathleen Mills.
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey.
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch.
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Aye.
Okay, motion unanimously carried. And then in our Section B, awards and introductions, we will hear from Emily Book about the Bravo Award winner this month.
Hello everyone. Emily Boot, Community Relations Coordinator. The Bloomington Parks and Recreation Department would like to recognize Susie Sullivan with the November Bravo Award. Susie couldn't make it today. She was out of town, but she has been a longtime volunteer at Leonard Springs Nature Days, specializing in the wetland station. In her role as a station facilitator, Susie teaches 6th grade students from MCCSC schools about the wetland ecosystem present at Leonard Springs, including the wildlife, formation, and environmental benefits that it provides. Susie was present at 6 out of 7 Nature Days this fall and has volunteered consistently with the program since 2019. She is one of our most dedicated station facilitators and is someone that Rebecca and myself know that we can count on week after week. Multiple students, parents, and teachers commented on the value of the program and how impressed they were with the knowledge and kindness of our volunteers this fall. We truly could not hold Leonard Springs Nature Days without our volunteers, and Susie's contributions to the program are very much appreciated by myself, Rebecca, and the department.
Okay, thank you for that, Emily, and thank you to Susie for all of that volunteering with the 6th graders at the Nature Days. All right, and then we'll move into our Section C, other business today. And first up, we have the review of the 2023 price schedule.
Hi.
Hi.
Kim Clapp, Office Manager. The draft of the 2023 price schedule was presented to the board at the October board meeting. There has been one slight change since that time. On page 21, the line was added damage deposit rentals on a range of 120 to 500. That is the only change that has occurred, and staff recommends approval of the 2023 price schedule, and the directors are available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, all right, thank you. Do we have any questions for division directors about the price schedule? No? All right. And do we have any public comment about the price schedule for 2023? Okay. All right, well then, we can take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the 2023 price schedule?
Second.
And a roll call vote?
Kathleen Mills,
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey,
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch,
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Okay, motion unanimously carried. And the next up, a couple of items from Barb Dunbar. First one, the contract with Universal Sign for trail branding sign fabrication and installation.
Good afternoon, Barb Dunbar, Operations Coordinator. Staff is recommending approval of a contract with Universal Sign for the branding, fabrication, and installation of trail signs throughout the park's trail system. Funding is for mostly from the ARPA funds, this year's ARPA funds, $16,000, and then from Parks General Fund, Operations General Fund, $7,191, for a total of $23,191. So the little bit of background about this project, it's been a while in the making. In the spring of 2020, the department hired RLR Associates, Inc. to develop trail system branding and signage design standards and guidelines that would promote consistency and user recognition within the city park's trail system. And that was considered phase 1 of the trail branding project. And then moving forward, 2021 just didn't get anything done with that. And I can't blame COVID on that one, unfortunately. Just a lot going on, lots of projects, and it kind of sat. So moving forward into this year, phase 2, I released an RFQ for the fabrication and installation of new trail signage based on the trail system branding and signage design manual that R&L developed for us. I received 2 submittals for this project, and Universal Sign was the lower of the 2.
Okay,
Any questions about that?
all right. Any questions about this item C2? No? Okay, all right, then we'll take a motion to approve.
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the contract with Universal Sign, Inc. for trail branding, sign fabrication, and installation.
Second.
All right, and a roll call vote?
Kathleen Mills,
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey,
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch,
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Okay, motion is carried. And then Barb will stay with us to tell us about the service agreement for portalet rentals and cleaning services.
I've been busy putting service agreements together in the
Yeah, I
last
can
month,
see
because
that, yeah.
a total of, 16 of them, I think, for this board meeting. Okay, so this one is with, we asking for approval of a contract, once again, with the Staples Event, which is just Izzy's, for our portalet, pit toilet pumping and cleaning services at 11 locations, and rental cleaning pumping at 1 location. The 1 location is just for a few months at RCA Park to make our pickleball folks happy, because they continue to play pickleball, at least they did when they can, when the winter's mild enough, they did last year. So beginning November 1, when that restroom gets winterized for the season, we've put a portalet at that location for them. And then that will be removed once those restrooms open again, which will be April 1st.
Okay, all right, and we've certainly used Izzy's before, so, yeah.
Yeah, very happy with them.
Okay, any questions about this one? All right,
No, I'll move to approve the service agreement with Izzy's for portalet rentals at multiple locations.
Second.
all right, and a roll call vote?
Kathleen Mills,
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey,
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch,
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
All right, motion is carried. And then the third item from Barb is the service agreement with Woods Electrical Contractors.
Yes, and this is, as you saw from the others, we utilize at least 4 different electrical companies. We overwhelm them with business with all of our lighting components all over our park system. So we're asking for review of a service agreement with Woods. This will be on an as-needed basis, funded through our 300 service lines in the operations budget. Woods, for the most part, we use them focused mostly on the B-line lights, and that's just constant. They're constantly going out, and we kind of utilize them specifically for that, and maybe some other smaller things here and there, but for the most part, our trail lighting.
Okay, and as we've discussed before, it's good to have people standing by for
Yes,
when these
yes,
things.
that is why we also
come
have
up.
3 other electric companies we're using for parks issues.
Okay, all right. Any questions about this one? No? Okay,
All right, I'll move to approve a service agreement with Woods Electrical Contractors.
Second.
and a roll
Thank
call
you.
vote, please.
Kathleen Mills.
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey.
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch.
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Barb. And the next step, Steve Cotter will tell us about the prescribed burn at Lake Griffey.
Yes, thank you. Steve Cotter, Natural Resources Manager, and I'm here today seeking approval for a contract to do another prescribed burn at Griffey Lake Nature Preserve. Habitat Solutions is the company that we would like to work with. They have done a burn out there previously in 2020, and it went very well. The Division of Nature Preserves has recommended that we burn the south and west facing slopes where we can to promote oak and hickory forest. So we would like to get Habitat Solutions back out there to burn a portion of the preserve on the north side of the lake, just up from the dam. So the west edge of the property on the north side of the lake. And it's about a 9.5 acre parcel that we're hoping to burn. And the contract would also include some work to remove beech and maple trees, which would be beneficial to the oak and hickories. The oak and hickory trees provide more benefits for wildlife, and we think they'll be more resilient in the face of climate change than the beech and maple forest that's growing there now. I should clarify, there are large oak and hickory trees out there right now, but they're having a hard time regenerating, in part because of the competition from the beech and maple, but also from deer browse. So we're trying to address both of those problems to benefit the oak and hickory forest.
That was my question. Okay, great, thank you. All right, any questions for Steve?
Was there, I thought I noticed in the report we had for this week that there was supposed to be a burn that was postponed. Is that it? What's the difference between that one and this one?
This is a different parcel. We were hoping to burn the slope just up from the boathouse parking lot last week, both on Tuesday and Wednesday, but we had to wave it off because of the weather.
Okay. And was that the contract for that with the same group or a different group? Or?
It is with the same company, yes. So they did one in 2020. We're hoping to still get one in next week if the weather cooperates this year, and then another one next spring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Steve?
I want to add one
Yeah.
caveat here that Steve doesn't know about yet. Legal advised us that the controller, for whatever reason, had missed approving on this one thus
Oh,
far.
okay.
They advised that we go ahead and have you vote on it this evening to approve it, and then contingent on the controller's approval, that would bring both halves of the approval
Okay.
together. It wasn't for any specific reason it was omitted, it was just,
Just a mistake?
Oversight,
Just-
yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, thanks. Okay, all right, do we have a motion to approve?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the contract with Habitat Solutions.
Second.
And a roll call vote?
Kathleen Mills.
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey.
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch.
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
All right,
Thank you very much.
motion's carried. Thank you, Steve. And then Tim will tell us about the contract with 4U Lawn and Landscape for Rose Hill concrete installation.
that's right, Tim Street, Operations Director for Bloomington Parks. I have tonight a contract with 4U Lawn and Landscape for concrete installation at Rose Hill Cemetery, approximately 500 square feet. The amount is not to exceed $9,175. You'll recall you've seen several contracts for the scatter garden as we've pieced together the different pieces we need. We've been able to make great progress so far on the scatter garden through the earthwork that's been done out there, through some stone restoration that's been completed, through the fence that's coming in the monuments, and the last piece will be the final concrete work to tie the new asphalts that was repaved this summer in with the scatter garden. So competitive bid went out. This was the low bid, and we are looking forward to working with 4U Lawn and Landscape. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, all right, any questions for Tim about this one? Nope, all right, then we can take a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the contract with 4U Lawn and Landscape for the concrete.
Second.
And a roll call vote?
Kathleen Mills.
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey.
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch. Israel Herrera.
Okay, motion's carried. And then Tim will stay with us to tell us about a revised policy on safety and security.
Yes, so we recommend approval of a revised policy 6090 for safety and security. Thanks to Leslie Brinson, who went through this and updated the red line version for you to see here. On review of this policy, we just discovered that some old language remained in the policy pertaining to an old program about IUPD cadets and things like that had worked with Parks and Security, and we wanted to change some references to make sure they were inclusive of both our own park staff who might be functioning in a patrol-type route and the marshal staff that work with us. So some very minor language change and some omission of old language that is no longer up to date.
Okay, so obviously this is just an editing task, but I would just note, because Jim's brought this up before, that there was a partnership between Parks and IUPD, which I know you'd mentioned before as a possible solution sometimes for having more eyes on certain parks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, but in this case, we're just cleaning up the language. So do we have a motion to approve? Oh, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
That's all right. That's all right. So I don't have any objection to the policy. I guess I'm just wondering if we may want to, and I'm okay with approving it. I just wonder if we ought to spend some more time on this at some point, given where we are with Marshall, given where we are with our current situation with the parks. I am curious I have no knowledge whatsoever what happened with the IUPD partnership and the cadets and all that kind of thing. I was just curious. I know we're taking that out. I guess I didn't even know we had ever had a partnership with them and
yeah, me
what
too.
happened to that. And I guess it seems to me, I've thrown out the idea before, which I have absolutely no knowledge of, so I'm not have anything to propose, but having some kind of ranger program or something, because maybe Marshall is doable. They've done a fine job. I have no objection to them, but just wondering if we can think longer term on this, and while it may not be this policy exactly, I just wonder if we can somehow maybe revisit this or revisit the whole security partnerships program, private security, all that issue at some point in time.
Yeah. I imagine Paula's going to want to speak to the institutional part of that, and I'm happy to go too.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Jim, I can tell you, good evening, everyone. Paula McDevitt, Director of the Parks Department. The backstory, the history of that is at one time, several years ago, IU had the resource to be able to go into partnership with us. So that is the human resource and the programming resource that was available several years ago. We checked in with them about those resources, and in the past couple of years, they have just not been there. So that is the reason why we wanted to specifically take that out of a policy.
What about either Paula or Tim? What about is there some long range strategy we can look at some point in time on this issue? This policy, I have no problem with the policy at this point, but just and I guess is just to put in the back of your minds. It seems to me that's something we should spend some more time on at some point in time, other than making a couple of changes to a policy.
I'll go, and Paula may want to add as well, but no, I think it's very much on our mind. Right now we're evaluating how did 22 go. We're almost at the end, not quite. We've talked about collecting data at the end of the year so we can evaluate what type of incident reports were handled, where were they handled, where were the hot spots of unallowed behavior in parks. And so we've been having those conversations with the security. We have conversations with BPD as well. So I think it remains to be seen what's going to happen with their staffing levels. They've expressed that, they were at a low and that it would take some time to get cadets and train and potentially recover from their low levels. I'm hoping that's in progress, but I think there's a lot of pieces, but I think it's absolutely worth us continuing to discuss and investigate.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions, Israel?
Thank you. Tim, just for clarification, so the new language wording would be to use contracted and hire? Because in the new language, I believe, and maybe I'm missing the segment or the place where I see hire, and what would be the difference between hire or contracted in different places?
Well, yeah, it's both is the answer. So we have, and we tried to make that language inclusive to cover that these policies apply. We have park services, what we call them. Those are staff that help us go to certain parks after hours during the season. They lock restrooms, they check restrooms, they do checks on those parks. Some of this could be considered to apply to them because they are in that role of after hours and checking parks at closing time. And then, of course, more recently, we hired Marshall at the very tail end of last year. I guess that was our first contract that you all approved. And so just making sure that that language is inclusive.
So using both hire and contracted?
Yes.
But what is the word hire in the language?
Does hire mean those are our employees that we hire, and
Correct.
contracted means they're independent contractors?
That was the existing
outside
language,
services.
and we just added
So hire
and
really means
contracted.
employee, I think is what, I don't want to put words in anybody's
Yeah, but the
mouth.
word,
Correct.
that word wasn't changed. It was just including the new word
Contracted,
contracted.
which is.
We
like
added the
partial.
words and contracted, yes.
And the other thing is, so IUPD, the Indiana University Police Department, right?
Correct.
And then the new language would be with the Bloomington Police Department without specifying the person, as it said before, with the captain of detectives in the previous.
As a point person that we coordinate with?
Yeah.
Is BPD? Yes. Yes, very much. From a city perspective, we coordinate with a couple staff members over at BPD, and this does name one of them as the specific person that we coordinate with.
Okay, so the change would be the training from now on would be with the Bloomington Police Department, and right now there won't be any new or training with the IUPD.
There was a specific paragraph in here that lingered from some years ago that basically said that parks had a cadet training program with Indiana University Police Department. That is no longer the case, and so since we are not doing that and instead we have Marshall Security contracted, we wanted to make sure that the policy updated and reflected what we are currently practicing in our parks. So removing the IU language and making sure it's added and contracted or contracted so that we are inclusive of all the efforts being done. I hope that answers your question.
That reminds me of another question I had. There's discussion of the Division Director of Operations and Development and the Superintendent of Operations. One is the overall responsibility, and then the superintendent has the day-to-day responsibility. Can we put a name with the titles, or who are those people and who?
Well, one of those is me, so
Okay.
Director of Operations, that's me, and then the
Okay.
Superintendent is Mark Morantz,
Okay.
who works with me in the Operations Division. I think we've tried to avoid putting names in there just because they tend to change, and we don't want to have to update the policy for a
Yeah,
name
no,
change.
I don't have a problem with that.
Oh, gotcha.
I just hadn't seen those titles before.
Yeah, nope, yep.
Exactly, or
Yep.
wasn't sure what the title's connected to, so that's fine.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, any other questions for Tim? Okay,
Well, let's move to approve the policy update for safety and security. That'd be policy 6090.
Second?
okay, and a roll call vote?
Kathleen Mills.
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey.
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch.
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
All right, motion is carried. And next up is the review of a policy on multi-use trails, design, and operations. Also Tim.
Correct. Thank you again. Another agenda item. So this is a new policy that we've been working on for some months. Born out of earlier this year, we had the Beeline Trail closure for the Johnson's Creamery smokestack. That sort of happened to us overnight, and after making the initial detour, we received some complaints and some research that there should be a better way to do this. We corresponded with the city engineering department in terms of looking at how we manage trails, and our parks perspective is very much that we manage trails both for their transportation infrastructure, which I think is increasingly important as we see people use alternative methods of transportation to get to and from where they're going, and for recreation, which we certainly have plenty of as well. So as part of managing it for transportation, this policy just spells out, some things we want to formalize that generally we do when we work to design trails and implement trails. We are working with professional engineers, whether that might be within the city or we might be hiring an outside firm that works with us to help in the design and the aspects of those trails that need that professional review. So that is written into there. It then basically classifies our trails based on the level of their transportation function. So we've got some what we're calling Class 1 trails that serve a critical, an important transportation function and have few or no similar alternative routes. Then we have these Class 2 trails, which serve a transportation function but are not critical connectors and have similar alternative routes. And then Class 3 trails, which function mostly as recreation facilities and have less importance as transportation facilities. So that really recognizes, we manage 30-odd miles of trail, and they're very diverse in what they are, from the 12-foot beeline to soft surface trails to little connectors to some trails that actually sort of also serve the function as sidewalk based on their location. I'm thinking of the east and west sides of Bryan Park. So we worked on this policy, and we made sure to get our engineering department's input onto it as well. And we actually based a sort of notification system to the Parks Board on trail closures, which is this flow chart that you find on the second page, depending on how you're looking at it. That basically dictates that by different class of trail and by the length of closure, or whether it is a full closure or a partial closure, we will introduce that to the Park Board for approval, which is also a chance for public comment. I think I've hit the highlights of it, but I'm sure there will be some questions, so I'm happy to listen and answer those.
So thank you for that, Tim. And then prior to the emergency situation with the smokestack, so there was no policy in terms of in terms of trail closures, just if something came up, it was closed for however length of time, or?
There may have been an internal practice.
Right.
That is the first time it had come up since I had joined the department, and others may speak to that before my time here. But there was not an official policy. So this is making sure we have a process for navigating that when it comes up in the future. And, generally, I think we've had a lot of our trails for 10, 12 years. We've been very lucky. We haven't had to have a lot of closures. But we do have a lot of improvements and things coming up, paving, repairs, bridges, things like that, as soon as 2023. So I think having this policy in place will help guide us and make good decisions around those.
Okay. All right. And just to, I know this is already done now, but the creamery thing really was, Parks was told, this is an emergency sort of situation, you need to close it now. Is that essentially what happened because it was unsafe?
We were, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, there weren't opportunities for us to change or do some better things there. And I think as we find a better way of doing things, we want to be committed to doing them better.
Sure. Okay. All right. Any questions for Tim about this?
My one question or comment is the word collaboration, and when it says in collaboration with the city engineer. I don't know I understand what collaboration means, but I don't know what that effectively means in this case. In other words, what happens if the park commissioners want to close it and the city engineer doesn't, or vice versa? collaboration seems to say that they both have to agree, or is really what we're saying there that the commissioners make the decision, but they're required to get input from the engineer? And that's a significant difference.
No, that's a great question, and I actually, based on some feedback given earlier, I actually changed that from consult to collaborate, because collaborate is mutual approval, as I look at the definition.
What happens if we don't have both parties agreeing?
Then we keep talking until we do, I suppose.
I like the word consult better.
Yeah. I think that's a nod, though, to recognize
As
that.
park commissioners, I prefer consult than collaborate. It seems to me it's our parks, and we ought to make that decision. We ought to consider what the engineer has to say.
I think that is an important nod, though, to the fact that the engineering department does have specific expertise in things like trail closures, the design of detours, approval of those. They manage a lot of that in the city.
So we should consult with them.
I chose the word collaborate. I'm not sure if consult is a better word or not, but I do think it's important that we
I'm
have.
just concerned about disagreement, and we don't have a clear whose jurisdiction is the trails. It's the Parks Department, isn't it?
Correct.
So if the Park Department says we want to close it or don't want to close it, and the engineer says we do, my question still comes back as to who wins that dispute. It seems to me the park commissioners are the ones that should decide that. So my suggestion would we change that back to consult with city engineer.
Okay. We can take that in consideration.
Are you looking, what line are you looking at?
Both in the chart, it may be elsewhere, but it says under 0 to 3 days, the superintendent can close it with I would say consultation with the city engineer. And then if it's greater than 3 days or any length of closure of a class 1, must receive Board of Park Commissioners approval in consultation with city engineer.
Under professional engineering, it does say consult twice. Yeah.
So I think then it should be consistent within the chart too, to say consult. So I would make a motion to approve with the change from collaboration to consult with city engineer.
And I'm glad that Jim brought this up, because in my mind, yes, they are trails that belong to parks, and it seems like parks would have the final word, but I just also wonder, I don't know, from a safety point of view, if the city engineer has some trumping of if we say no, we think it's okay to leave it open, the city engineer says it's unsafe. I agree, it would be good to have a clarification of, like, where does the final decision rest?
Okay. I think more than likely we'd want to look at that and discuss that a little further to make sure we get that just right. I do think it is important that we have and honor the expertise that comes from the engineering department in terms of road design, safety, AASHTO standards, things like that. And that is.
I absolutely agree with that. That's why we should consult with them.
So the discrepancy, I'm seeing the discrepancy is that under professional engineering, the language used there is consult. I see consult. I don't see collaboration there.
It is in the flow chart, yeah.
And then collaborate, and then under temporary closures, I see consultation there. And then in the chart, I just see collaboration. Am I looking
Yeah, I
at the
think
right
that's right.
Yeah.
version? So whichever way we go, it needs to be
Consistent.
It needs to be consistent, yeah. I mean, I guess I look at, when we look at these other things that we approve, how much are we collaborating and how much are we consulting? If it's like the controlled burn, or, that we're talking about at Griffey, or we're talking, I mean, how would we define those too?
That's a good question. So what's your question on the burn? Sorry, I'm trying to suss out.
Yeah, I guess, like, is that considered a consultation, or is that a collaboration, and then we make the final decision? Or is that in collaboration?
Who are we consulting or collaborating with on the burn? I don't think anybody.
Well, right, I mean, I suppose this.
We're hiring someone for the
Right.
contracting
Or
the
is
burn.
there another, so that was, I just saw Steve, I'm just looking right at Steve. But like, is there what other projects have we looked at where there's another member of the city, so outside of the Parks Department, that we work with on a decision?
I mean, it's probably semantics in
Yeah.
a certain word. On the other hand, I can't help but think like a lawyer, and when you say collaboration, that means both people have to agree. And I'm not suggesting that we cut the city out of anything. I want their input, I want their
Right, they're the
consultation,
experts.
but collaboration seems to me to require, and I can't hardly imagine the circumstances where we wouldn't take their advice.
Right.
But it seems
Right.
to me that, first of all, it needs to be consistent throughout the policy.
Sure.
One, and two, it seems to me what we're really asking them for is consultation. I mean, there's lots of things that we rely on advice on complying with the ADA. We rely on advice on all kinds of things. And that's what we would be doing with the city and engineer. We're going to get their advice. It says we have to get their advice, and more likely than not, 99.9 times out of 100, we're going to follow that advice. But I just don't want, it just seems to me that that's what we're asking for, is consult with them for advice. So I guess maybe it's died of lack of a second, but my motion is to change collaboration in the chart, at least, and anywhere else, to consultation like it is in the rest of the document, to make it consistent.
This is a friendly amendment to the language, right? And this is a policy, correct?
This is not a policy yet. It is a proposed
It's a
policy.
new policy.
So we should, there is a friendly amendment from the commission. So I wonder if we need to vote in the amendment that we would like to suggest to Tim and approve it, since it's a change in a NES policy, right?
Oh, I defer it to the next meeting.
Or Paula, you can help us here, since we are changing language.
Right, so
We are
it's a.
proposing, sorry, we are
I think Paul is.
proposing, right? Jane, we are proposing
too.
changing a word
I think
in the policy.
procedural question. Paul, maybe you can help with the procedural question.
Yeah.
Sure. So this is a proposed policy, so you can certainly make an amendment to change the wording, or you can have this discussion, and we can bring it back at the next meeting after we dive deeper into collaboration versus consultation. But this is a brand-new policy. It's not a policy that exists or that we're editing or in any way. This is, this type of back and forth and conversation is why we brought it forward today.
Is there any rush in approving it today, or is there any reason not to send it back and we can
No,
look at it again?
and I think I would prefer that, honestly,
Yeah,
to have the chance to discuss with the engineering department and make sure we get it just right. Because, like you said, it would not be my intent to bring something before a park board unless we were in agreement with the engineer and the safety standards beforehand. So I'm not sure we would ever get to that point, but I think it's a valid question, and we want to make sure we get that right on.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think, well,
procedurally do anything to table it?
Yeah,
Move to table
table it.
this?
I'd second the motion to table.
okay, and a roll call vote, please?
Do we need to do public comment?
Oh, yes, any public comment on this item C8? Just tell us your name, and we generally allow 2 minutes for public comment.
2 minutes, okay. Hi, thanks. My name is Greg Alexander. Thank you for considering this policy. I'm here to raise concerns that the policy doesn't actually comply with existing law. Bloomington Municipal Code, Chapter 1208, requires that anyone closing right-of-way gets a permit from the city's traffic engineer, so they have the authority over right-of-way. Indiana statute requires that transportation decisions are made under the direct supervision, not consultation, not collaboration, but direct supervision of a licensed engineer. The policy in front of you requires only consultation or collaboration. One thing you need to be aware is that city staff, both in engineering and in parks, has been adamant that the detour on the Beeline, which I hope you realize was extraordinarily substandard, was done with both collaboration and consultation, and yet nobody can say who designed the detour. The engineers are adamant, by the way, that they did not design the detour. So, you know, consultation and collaboration both aren't worth a darn. If you think about it, this requirement to get a permit from engineering is not unreasonable. This board has the authority to decide, for example, to install solar panels in a park. But in order to do that, the department is going to pull a permit from the building department. You don't have absolute authority over parks facilities. You have to get a permit to do certain kinds of work because they're safety critical. There's some debate as to whether 1208, the ordinance, applies to the Beeline. I think it's reasonable to ask, how can you tell whether the Beeline is right-of-way for this ordinance? And the city's transportation plan answers that question. It says explicitly right-of-way. And it makes sense. It was built with transportation funds. You didn't build it with parks funds. You went to transportation bodies and got transportation funds from the federal government for it. Well, I asked that exact question to city legal staff last month at the Traffic Commission, and they straight up refused to answer. I think this commission needs an answer to that question. How can we tell whether BMC 1208 applies to the Beeline? How can we tell that? And without an answer to that question, it's reckless to institute a policy that directly flies in the face of city ordinance. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. All right, so we have tabled C8, and then Tim,
Did we vote on
did we vote?
tabling it?
Yeah, we did, yes.
Oh, we did?
Okay.
No,
Oh, we
did
did not.
You voted, but I don't think you took the roll call yet.
Yeah, that's
So
it.
we can
Okay,
do the roll call
all
real
right,
quick.
so, that's right, okay. Table C8, yes, okay. So the roll call,
Kathleen Mills.
aye.
Ellen Rodkey.
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch.
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Okay, so the motion to table it carries, and then Tim will tell us about the next review of policy, multi-use trails, rules, and signage.
I jumbled up all my paperwork. I think I've got the right thing here.
We've got you working hard tonight.
All right, so one more policy to review. This is a policy to update trail etiquette and signage. This is related to multi-use trails. As part of the contract you just heard about from Barb, we will be updating trailhead signage, branding, things like that. That signage includes rules where if you went out to a trailhead right now and you read the rules for trail use on that, you would find that it says no motorized vehicles. That is just not up to date anymore. Every other bike it seems like we pass on the Beeline is an e-bike, and those are motorized vehicles. So we have worked on these updated policies by looking at other municipalities, how they have dealt with the e-bike question. Many of them have not yet dealt with it. We also went to Bike Ped and Safety Commission to get their input on these rules and tweaked a couple things based on their input. So what we have before you, and basically there's very minor language changes to our existing trailhead signage apart from this new policy that says bicycles and similar vehicles equipped with electric motors. This is basically language that relies on the city's Title 15 that already provides a definition. Are permitted on trails when operated with a maximum speed of 20 miles per hour. That is with the exception of mobility aids as well. Happy to answer any questions about this.
Tim, is similar vehicles, is that really just a reference to like rented scooters? Is that,
Essentially, yes.
okay, and my sense, I don't know, is that they could go more than 20 miles an hour? Is that?
For the most part, no.
Oh, okay.
So I'm 99% certain all of the scooters in the city top out about 18, 19,
Oh,
20
okay.
miles an hour.
Okay.
There are 3 different classes of e-bikes that are recognized. Class 1 is pedal assist up to 20 miles an hour. Class 2 is throttle up to 20 miles an hour. Class 3, which is I have not seen as many of, although it's hard to tell just by looking, can go up to 28 miles per hour. So, you know, is this something we can be out there with a radar gun necessarily, you know,
Right.
clocking people on the Beeline? Maybe
Right.
not. But we want to at least establish a safety policy to guide as we see these become more and more prevalent.
Yeah, I guess that my question would be, like, are we benchmarking these against other municipalities with trails, and just kind of learning more about what they're doing? I don't know. Is there a point at which there are radar guns? I don't know. I kind of.
I'm sorry, what was your last question?
Is there a point at which there are radar guns? Because we just see the e-bike, the rise of the e-bike has been pretty significant.
It will be interesting to see what continues to happen with this. I'll say for the most part, we have not had a lot of incidents that are specifically related to the use of an e-bike. Not that I've seen anyway come across in our incident reports. Some other municipalities in Indianapolis, I believe if you're on the Monon, it would actually change a few times what the rule is based on the municipality that you're in. I know there's a couple of them that just, I think the Nickel Plate Trail has not updated any policy yet about it. As we look, there's quite a few out there like that just haven't changed language and updated yet. But I will mention that the state, by default, the DNR, does by default allow Class 1 and 2 e-bikes to be operated on trails. Individual trail managers can opt out of that or create rules against it, but we're already sort of seeing that at the state level they're accepted as natural means of being on a trail.
Yeah, I mean, if they're accepted, and it does seem like they're inevitable. But I do hear from people from time to time, walkers who feel like they're always like kind of taking their life in their hands with all the motorized, it was a little different. Just human-powered bicycles are a little different and bicyclists are almost always good about saying on your left or whatever. But but as I say, it seems to be inevitable that scooters and e-bikes will be on the same trails. So
Yeah, keeping an eye on those incident reports, I think is, learning more about that.
Yeah, and we'll continue to research and look at it and update as we go, of course.
So, quick question, when we say, to make sure that I understand this, we say electric motors are permitted on trails when operated with a maximum speed of 20 miles per hour. So that means that I could have a Class 3 bike as long as I don't operate it at 22 or 23 or 28.
Correct. And again,
Okay.
recognizing that is
Because I have electric bikes in Minnesota, and they have very strict rules on you can't have a throttle on the bike trails. So throttles aren't permitted, and you can't have a Class 3, even if it's so. Which I'm not advocating for that. I'm fine with the 20, but I just want to make sure that we.
your understanding is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay. Any other questions for Tim?
No, I can move to approve this new policy 13220 for multi-use trails rules and signage.
I'll second.
Okay, and a roll call vote?
Kathleen Mills,
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey,
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch,
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Motion carried. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
And then finally, under Section C, Darren Eads will tell us about the service agreement for HVAC preventative maintenance at Twin Lakes.
Good afternoon. Darren Eads, Sports Facility Coordinator at the Twin Lakes Recreation Center. You had before you this afternoon the preventive maintenance agreement for the HVAC system at the TLRC. Staff recommends approval of that. Commercial Service currently has the agreement this year, and we're looking to renew that again for next year. Glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, any questions for Darren?
Now I will move to approve the service agreement with Commercial Services at TLRC.
I'll second. I do have a quick question,
Oh,
I guess.
sorry.
This was not part of the consent agenda because of the dollar amount, or is that why it wasn't part of the?
Yes.
Service
Yeah, okay.
agreements.
All right, thanks. That's all I had, but I seconded.
Okay, and a roll call vote?
Kathleen Mills,
Aye.
Ellen Rodkey,
Aye.
Jim Whitlatch,
Aye.
Israel Herrera.
Thank you.
Great, motion carried. Thank you, Darren. And then we have no reports this afternoon, so then we move over to Section E for public comment. If there's anyone who would like to comment on something that was not on the agenda tonight, just a general comment, or anyone online. We don't have anyone here in person, but do we have anyone online who,
If anyone online
I
would
don't
like
have-
to make a comment, raise your hand.
does this woman named Paula McDevitt want to comment?
No, I was going to say there is no comment.
Okay, okay, all
on
right.
Zoom. I'm good, thank you.
Okay. All right, then we will turn back over to Tim. Do you have anything you need to tell us to wrap up?
Nothing else that I've seen come in. The only other thing I would mention is good news. We were able to open the new playground at the Waldron Hill Buskirk Park today. Thankfully, after a long time of construction in that park, and we will be planning a more formal dedication ribbon cutting for that in the future. The next park board meeting will be December 13th.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you, and with that, we'll adjourn the November meeting of the Bloomington Board of Park Commissioners.